video 1. There's going to be 3 videos here. We know how important this scene is. We know that it is literally the starting point of the play. But of course, the drama of the play, the seeds for what comes later in the play, are all sown in this act, in this scene. We're on page 6 of our paper 2 book. You'll see the summary of the scene there, which are key words all laid out. Remember, that's your job. You're going to read those summaries. My job, what I'm going to do, is go through the key quotes. And then in our knowledge checks at the end of the video, you're going to try and examine yourself on a few of these quotes. Remember, I'm going to do a knowledge check on every quote. You don't have to learn every quote, but the simple fact is, the more you know, the better your answers will be. And if you can just dedicate yourself to practicing using the knowledge checks to build that knowledge, you're going to get better. Let's get going. The first quote, and again, remember, your teachers might get you to learn quotes which are slightly different to the quotes that I'm looking at. Doesn't matter. What matters is that the quotes are from the play, that you know what they mean, and that you understand how to use them depending on whatever question you're writing about, or whatever question you're answering. The first quote that I really like in the play is spoken by the Earl of Gloucester. And he talks about his son Edmund, speaking to Kent. And he says of Edmund, "I have so often blushed to acknowledge him." Now, to acknowledge him is to recognise him. Why would Gloucester blush to recognise his own son? And the answer, of course, is that Edmund is illegitimate. Now, the reason that that text box is there is so that you can be active, not passive. As you watch these videos, make notes in those boxes. Much of the vocabulary that I use, I will put into, again, the knowledge checks at the end of the video. But it's important that you try to make notes as we go along on each quote. And the purpose of that is to help you retain the quote and understand the quote. There's no point in learning a quote if you don't know what it means. So here we have this recognition by Gloucester that he has something to be ashamed of. Now, why would Gloucester feel shame? Well, the answer very simply is that he had an affair. And in this world, he committed a sin. The moral context of this world in which the play is set, he broke God's law. And the result of that affair was a child who was born out of wedlock. And that child is Edmund. So here's Gloucester talking about his own human frailty. But he's talking about his shame about his son in front of his son. And we learn about Gloucester being insensitive, lacking awareness. And when we watch Edmund and we see him in this scene listening to his father's words, we understand why he might feel resentful of his father. And that helps us then further understand Edmund's motivations and behaviour later on in the play. The second quote that I really love, and remember, you don't have to learn every one of these quotes, or indeed from the first word to the last word as I have them laid out, so you can look at certain key terms. The second quote I love here is Gloucester's comment, "Yet was his mother fair. There was good sport at his making, and a whoreson must be acknowledged." Just that word whoreson, if you knew that word and you understand the impact that that word must have on Edmund, you've got loads to say here. He is saying the sex was good. Edmund's mother was gorgeous. There was great fun had when he was being conceived. And he's calling Edmund's mother a whore. And he's calling Edmund, therefore, a whore son. Imagine the impact those words must have on Edmund. Shakespeare is giving us these words so that when we watch Edmund's villainy later on, it has context. We understand why he behaves the way he behaves. Very important. But of course, then you get to, could it be the most important quote in the whole play? I think it probably is. And this is one you have to know. Lear's great abdication announcement. No. When he says no, it just gives us an indication of his power, doesn't it? Know that we have divided in three our kingdom, and 'tis our fast intent to shake all cares and business from our age. It's a wonderful, devastating moment in the play. Lear is saying, oh, you know, guys, shucks, I'm old. I'm past it. I think I'm going to retire and hand over power to those who are younger and better able to wield it. And for a moment, we think, all right, Lear, fair play. That's a reasonable thing to do. You're showing an awareness of your own weakness, and you're showing a willingness to put yourself in a secondary position in order to look after the interest of the nation, which is what Lear's supposed to do. But of course, that's not what's happening here. What Lear is doing here is beginning a process that will lead to utter chaos in the kingdom, because he believes that while he can hand over power, royal authority to his daughters, he will still maintain power over them as their father. So while they may technically have royal authority, they will always be obedient to him, and therefore he's not given up power at all. He's blinded enough to see, blinded by his hubris, by his egoism, by his sense of self-importance, to think that that's the truth. Goneril and Regan take great pleasure as the play progresses in showing him that that is not the truth. He announces at the same time that he's going to not only abdicate, but he's going to divide the kingdom. And he says, we have this hour a constant will to publish our daughters' several dowers. See that? Your dower is your inheritance. He says, I'm going to abdicate, but I'm also going to tell my daughters what they're going to inherit from me. I'm going to, in other words, make a living will, give them their inheritance now. And the big part of that quote you learn, the part that you need to know, is this part here, that future strife may be prevented now. And there we have one of the most important quotes in the play for Lear's character, for shadowing as a dramatic technique, for the theme of conflict, for blindness. What Lear is saying is, I'm going to give my daughters their inheritance. I'm going to tell them what parts of the kingdom they're going to get, because I don't want any trouble in the future. And of course, there's this wonderful irony that by dividing the kingdom, he is going to guarantee future strife. He can't see that. He can't understand that. He can't compute that, because he's not capable of seeing that he might be wrong. And of course, that leads him to this spiral that results in the tragedy of the play. He demands that his daughters, he asks them, don't forget, you know the quote, which of you shall we say doth love us best? He wants his daughters to come forward and debase themselves, demean themselves, humiliate themselves in order to receive their part of the inheritance. And Goneril knows her father. She knows what he's like. She knows how vain he is. So she plays his game and she lies in order to achieve her goals. She says, I love you more than words can wield the matter. What a great quote. There are no words that can express how much I love you, Daddy. It is a great example of hyperbole, exaggeration that's so obvious that it's not to be believed. But of course, Lear believes it because she understands him, and she understands that the more exaggerated the flattery is, the more he's going to eat it up, because that's how vain he is. And she's given her third of the kingdom. We know that Regan follows in her sister's footsteps. She understands that you have to be cynical in Lear's world. Cynical means not be guided by morality, but do what needs to be done to achieve your goals. And she sees Goneril lie and be rewarded, so she also lies. And she says, I am made of that self-same metal as my sister. We'll go through those quotes in much more detail when we look at the mind maps on each individual character. But when she says, I am of that self-same metal, made of that self-same metal as my sister, she says, yeah, what she says. Whenever she said, that's how I feel. Actually, she then goes on to say, well, actually, I love you more than that. So, again, these words are disingenuous. They're dishonest. She doesn't mean them. She's not telling the truth. But again, Lear, vain, arrogant, pompous, blinded by his sense of self-importance, eats up this flattery and rewards his daughter with 1/3 of the kingdom. He then turns to Cordelia, who he refers to as our joy. I think is always interesting that he calls her our joy, which means my favourite. Imagine how Goneril and Regan might feel when they see having debased and demeaned and humiliated themselves to tell their daddy how much they love him. Then him turn around to the youngest daughter and say, well, yeah, whatever, you're my favourite. And he asks Cordelia, and she says, nothing, my lord. And he says, nothing, and she says, nothing. And he says, nothing will come of nothing. It's a great quote, isn't it? You can feel the atmosphere change, the pressure drop at that moment. You can feel the anger, the tension rise in Lear when he thinks that he's not getting what he wants. He's like a child who's spoilt, and when he doesn't get what he wants, the reaction is to be outraged. Cordelia is, of course, a character possessed of dignity, of decency, of integrity. She won't be like her sisters. She perceives her father's weakness. She understands that what he's asking her to do is simply beneath his dignity and her dignity. And she tells him, Dad, I love you, but I'm not going to play this game. I love your majesty, she says, according to my bond. In other words, I love you as a child should love their parent. What more should he need? Well, he needs a lot more than that, because to him, Cordelia's refusal to obey his instruction, that refusal is an act which displays not love, but defiance and disrespect. And his reaction, of course, is out of all proportion to the offence. And he tells her, here, I disclaim my paternal care, all my paternal care. And the speech goes on and includes the words, and these are the words we have to know. He says to her, thou, my sometime daughter. My sometime daughter means you are no longer my child. How dare you behave in such a way? No child of mine would ever behave in that way. You are no longer my child. And Lear, in Act 1, Scene 1, at that moment, makes a mistake that he's going to pay a heavy, heavy price for. And indeed, so is Cordelia, and so are the rest of the people of the kingdom that he has sworn to protect. That's the end of the first of the 3 videos in which we analyse the key events of Act 1, Scene 1.